This is a homily for the 19th Sunday of Ordinary Time, a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. After he had fed the people, Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing this, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came towards them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord. As we listen to this reading, we often think that it's surrealistic. It's not quite what could really happen. Someone walking on the water. And so as we think about this, we have to find out, well, what is the message that is being told to us? A sense that we need the security of God with us in the terrible times that can happen to any of us. We all know tough times. We even know tough storms. I can remember one when I was a little kid at home. It was early in the summer, and the storm started. My mother would always take a blessed candle and light it, and the electricity went off, and all we could hear on the galvanized roof was the sound of hail. I often said it was the quietest, the most silent time within my heart that I ever had, because we couldn't do a thing about it. It was destroying the crops right outside, and we were all sitting there praying if we could, but sitting there helpless in what we could do. A storm. And that was what Peter and the disciples also saw at this time and experienced. The waves being very high. And they were fishermen. They knew the sea. But they also knew the dangers of the sea. And so we look at that a little deeper and we say, oh, well, they really were frightened, weren't they? And the answer is yes. If any of us has been in a boat when it's a very high tide or something, and we have seen water waves coming, and we know the helplessness that they had. And Jesus, who tried to go alone and pray, as he often did, he was walking towards them on the sea. And as we look at this and hear Peter say, well, if it's really you, call me. And Jesus said, come. So he got out and started and found out that he was also empowered to do the same thing in some way until he got scared, until his faith left him or was in a weakened condition. "Do you of little faith?" And so he sank into the water, and Jesus saved him. And that brings us all to this story, because this story is the story of our life and that of our church. The church has gone through stormy times. I once picked one year out of random to see, was things really that bad? And I went back and looked that one year up and found out there was a terrible thing happened in Japan, of all places. But also there were all kinds of difficulties occurring at that year. And yet the church survived it. It came on because Christ was with us. Emmanuel, God with us. And the fact that God is with us during storms is something we've got to face at this time in the pandemic. We have God with us. We have to know and realize in our faith that we are secure with God, no matter how tough the times are. In the case of the story I told at home, I mentioned it was early spring, and we were able, even though the crops were destroyed, to go out and replant them in time to have a good harvest later in the year. And so that, in one sense, was a blessing, even though in disguise at the moment it occurred, we seemed so utterly helpless. And I guess we could feel that way about what is occurring here, but we know that we are called to do deep things. In fact, Christ said at the Last Supper that you will be doing greater things than what I did. Now, walking on water is pretty important, you might say, but it isn't really changing the history of the world. It is something that is very unusual, and it doesn't normally happen, though we hear about saints who have elevation. They'll elevate above the ground in some way, or we may have a dream in which we ourselves are doing these kind of things. But in truth, they are very rare, and they really do not push the efforts that we're trying at a great degree. But we are called to do great things. And we are called at this time to save our wounded earth. And we forget about that during this pandemic when day after day it has taken second, third, and last place that the curbing of the climate must be done, even though the leadership at this time does not allow it to be considered, and therefore that is a crime against humanity. But still, we are called to save our earth. You say, Christ saved. Yes, but we are part of Christ's body. And as part of Christ's body, there is an advancement in theology to where we are entering into the salvation of our earth itself. Unusual, yes, but true. We are called by Christ to help in the work in which he is doing. It is interesting that that is really what part of our life is, to always be able, in some way, to walk on the waters of the world that needs us at this time. And that is more than walking on waters. It is to walk on the opposition that denies that we have any need for change. It is that we as people have to be secure with the Lord. In the middle of the storm in which we have been facing ourselves, with the Lord's effort, we can make a change, and we can really curb the climate change that is occurring before us. And our earth can be saved. And the people, millions of people who could otherwise be harmed by the flooding of the oceans, by and the extreme weather conditions that could easily occur. For all of these, we know and we must do something about it. So we look again and see that Jesus, who was extremely hurt at that time because of the death of his, murder of his cousin, John the Baptist, and was trying over and over to get away to just think about it a while, pray about it, that every time there was something that got in the way. A crowd of people, as we heard last week, and now, at the moment that he did, the storm comes up at sea, and his very apostles were in some ways filling a situation that was unsafe for them. So he came to their rescue. Jesus is coming to our rescue too. We have to have faith that God will empower us to make the changes that are due. Christian people have a word that they must say. We do not allow deniers to have the upper hand, or those who want to make profits, the profiteers, who want to hold on to fossil fuels as long as they can. No, we are people that are called to make renewable energy possible, to have a Green New Deal that must be done, that this is something that is not something socialistic, but rather it's Christian social justice at work. We are a people that must speak up. And at times when these storms occur, we have to speak up all the louder. We have God with us. We have the courage it takes to speak. Let us do so.